Greetings from Costa Rica. My name is Matt Rosensteele. I work with Coldwell Banker Tamarindo Realty, broadcasting here from Tamarindo in Guanacaste, Costa Rica. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, love a subscribe. If you're watching on Facebook, a like would be wonderful. Today, this is chapter 3 in our look at the buying process. 2019, I had done an overview that was extensive, one huge video, and I've been breaking it up into chunks to make it more manageable, enjoyable, digestible. Chapter 1 looked at some major questions. Chapter 2, we started the buying process with the offer. Chapter 3 here now, we're going to be looking at your deposit and due diligence. Again, my name is Matt Rosensteele. Feel free to send me an email to matt@cbtamarindo.com. Any questions are welcome, whether they're about this video, something else you've seen on the channel, or Costa Rica in general. Anyhow, let's get started talking about our buying process. Last chapter, we had made our offer. Let's say that now the seller has countersigned your offer. Excitement! We are under contract for a property here in Costa Rica. You're one step closer to your dream. Let's consider it, first of all, that in Costa Rica, signing offers is one step closer, but as I previously mentioned, all kinds of contingencies come up here. Be sure that you've got them covered in your offer. Watch my other video about that so that you're ready for success to move forward. In looking at the deposit and due diligence today, we're going to cover 3 quick questions. First of all, looking at the deposit timeline and amount, how much, how soon. Next, we'll talk about the components of due diligence, and in that, we'll be looking first at things that are done by either an inspector, interior or exterior, and finally, the things that your attorney will look at during due diligence. Again, any questions, feel free to send me an email to matt@cbtamarindo.com. You've signed your offer, we're under contract, it's time to make your deposit. Well, in your offer, you should have specified exactly how many days from the execution of the offer, or perhaps even an actual deadline date as to when you would have your deposit into an escrow account. Important note there, I wholeheartedly recommend using an escrow service as a third party to handle funds for any transaction in Costa Rica, whether you're buying let's say for any real estate transaction in Costa Rica, not necessarily groceries at the supermarket, but anyhow, use an escrow service. A standard timeline based on my 8 years experience here in this region, and based on recent sales and what I see happening most often, is that buyers are given usually about 10 business days, maybe 2 calendar weeks, that sort of timeline from the date that the contract, the offer, your option to purchase agreement is executed by both parties until you've initiated your wire for the deposit. Now that's an important distinction. I say that you've initiated your wire because very often the standard practice is that if you've set a deadline and if for some reason the funds haven't arrived in an escrow account, but instead you've initiated the transfer before that deadline, usually the standard is that you're initiating the transfer and sending a receipt that you've sent it is sufficient to say that you've made the deadline. Again, that's an important nuance, one of a million things that you can put in your offer. Initiating the deposit will be sufficient to prove that the buyer has met their deadline or something, anywhere along those terms, so that if you're worried, well, my money's going to be coming from Appleville Credit Union and they take 20 days to initiate an international wire, make sure that in your offer you've said that, look, I'm going to initiate within the 10 business day or 2-week calendar deadline, but providing reference will be sufficient to prove that I've made my deposit by a time. The amount of your deposit, again, a generalization based on my experience, this region, etc., but you're looking most often at 10% here. Obviously, in previous episodes, I've emphasized this is a cash market for foreign buyers. Your deposit is not necessarily 10% of another amount that you're paying up front to then finance the property over 30 years. 10% of the total amount, with the full amount due at closing, obviously, paid by you or obviously provided through cash so that you can close. You might see differences. 10% is not absolutely a rule, or very much because Costa Rica is an immature real estate market without quite the history or institutional strength that the US or Canada has. 10% is a guideline, something that you'll see most frequently in my region. I think for higher end properties, you might see lower deposits at times, or for very inexpensive properties, getting below $50,000, getting below a piece of undeveloped land, let's say. Really, you might be seeing something that's more than 10%, but that's what I'm going to say is the absolute standard, and probably what you would hear from 90% of people in my area. So you've sent your deposit. The escrow service confirms that they've received your funds and that they're holding 10% of the total purchase price. You are now in due diligence. What has to happen during the due diligence process? Well, here in Costa Rica, it's not too dissimilar than what you would see in other places, except that here, the entire legal side, the title search, really is handled by your public notary, the attorney that as a buyer you have designated to handle the transaction. Sorry to be overbearingly repetitive, but yet another item that's covered in the offer. Which public notary is going to handle the sale of this property, so that the sellers know exactly who you've designated to handle it, which is your right as the buyer. So anyhow, this public notary that you've designated in your offer represents your interests. They're the ones doing due diligence for you, and they're the ones that first and foremost are going to pull that title from the Costa Rican registry, which we discussed in the first chapter of the buying process, is open to the public. The attorney is going to pull the title, look down through, okay, I see an easement, I'm going to look that up, okay, it's just the road. I see a lien, okay, this is a mortgage, we have to make sure this is handled at closing. The attorney handles that, not a title company here, because that information is handled 100% open to the public. Your attorney is going to look at the full legal side on that end, and usually your realtor or your attorney can recommend qualified people to do the other component, which are inspections. During your due diligence process, you are absolutely enabled to conduct topographical or engineering inspections, whatever you would like to do. Again, designate it in your offer. We will be doing the X, Y, and Z studies on the property during due diligence. And during this process, really your key advocate, your realtor or your attorney, whoever you're going to for information, should be able to recommend the different collection of inspectors based on your needs. Inspection here is not nearly as highly developed a science as it is in other places. There are great professionals who can provide a high quality inspection at a reasonable price. I do see lots of people getting into real estate transactions who are disappointed by the inspection because really it's not up to the level that you might see in the US or Canada, where you have someone with extensive training specifically in inspection going through every single component of the house and really filing a report. Here you see something that might appear to be much more basic and sort of a qualitative overview of what your house looks like or condo. The topographical inspection, obviously that's going to be more relevant if you are buying a land parcel. I highly recommend in those situations where you have a lot, finding a topographer to verify that the boundaries are correct. Shout out to Kati, recently, revealing one of the many reasons you should do this. Fence lines over the years get moved, or you might find out that, well, the registered survey for this property was registered using an antiquated system or technology here in Costa Rica. These days, the system is a little bit different, and so all kinds of GPS points, you see properties where there's slight overlaps, and you might want to know that, you absolutely want to know that as you're buying the property. Oh, this registered land plat actually includes 30 meters of the neighbor's property, and we need to resolve this. Anyhow, topography, engineering inspections, you can get a reliable home contractor to go in and look at the different systems to give you an idea of what you're going to be looking at. Costs can be all over the board. I see home inspections at about $500 with a full report. Topographical inspections are based on the size of the property and the complexity of the job. If you've got a square piece of, a tenth of an acre property, I would estimate that you're looking at a budget between $300 and $500. If you have a round, very complicated, large property, it's going to cost significantly more than that $300 to $500 number that I would just use as sort of a base rate for the topography. How long does due diligence last? Well, that's another question that hopefully you laid out clearly in your offer as part of the terms and conditions describing the sale process. I would say in this area, there are a lot of different standards used, especially based on the complexity of the sale. Let's say the easiest to use generalization for any land parcel, regular condo, a home of reasonable size would be a 20 calendar days, 25 calendar days maximum, somewhere in that range. The timeline you can set based on when the escrow service receives the deposit. You could set an actual calendar timeline. Those can be a little bit more complicated because you worry that, well, if something else gets delayed. But anyhow, another component, the millionth component of your offer that can specify exactly how long the due diligence period is going to last, the fact that your deposit is refundable during due diligence, and most offers will also specify that if you as the buyer are unsatisfied with due diligence, you only have to send written notice before X deadline or X number of days before closing date in order to get a full refund of your deposit. Anyhow, to touch on the last component of due diligence, the stuff your attorney is going to get. I mentioned that they're going to do the title search, review all the liens, mortgages, on and on. But the attorney handling the transaction for you is also going to request a list of items from the seller's side, depending on the property you're buying. If you're buying into a condo association, they'll ask for minutes from the last couple meetings. They'll ask for financial records if you so choose. They'll definitely ask for things like the bylaws of the condominium, other information to give you the full perspective on how the condo association operates. The attorney will also check into back taxes to make sure that the property is up to date. Virtually any kind of liability that could affect the property, the attorney has the responsibility to check into it and tell you either, yes, it's okay, that this is not a problem, this easement is just a road, etc., or to tell you, this is how we are going to resolve this due diligence item at closing. The attorney might say, okay, look, they have $2,000 of back municipal taxes against the property. We can sign an addendum to the contract. Or if your offer was thorough enough, we're just going to have it set up so that that is resolved at closing through the math of their net balance payment. So anyhow, they might see that there are pending bills, little issues here and there, You could even see that there's a topographical difference, and at that point you can decide, okay, sellers, I will only approve due diligence on X or Y condition, that A, you fix the fence line, B, we get a new topography study, C, we set up everything to arrange that the municipal taxes are paid ahead of time, etc. So anyhow, once you're satisfied as a buyer, your attorney should send you a full report of all of this. The taxes, the condo bylaws, everything that they've compiled. We checked out the topography. Here's the topographer's report, the general contractor's report, on and on. Here's your due diligence report. You have the option to say, yes, this looks good. You have the option to say, no, this doesn't look good. I want a refund. Or you have the option to say, I want further clarification and I need an extension to due diligence. All of those options are on the table. Make sure you're communicating well with your attorney and that before the deadline, you're providing any written notice that you need to do. But anyhow, we'll imagine that you're saying, yes, we'll move on to chapter 4 of the buying process here. We'll imagine we're ending due diligence. Thank you very much for watching today on Costa Rica FAQ. This was chapter 3 of the buying process, focused on the deposit and the due diligence. We talked about the deposit timeline and amount. Timeline we gave basically 10 business days, 2 weeks as a generalization. And as that same generalization for the amount, we said 10%. And then in due diligence, we talked about the different aspects of the inspections you can request, how your deposit is managed, and the different items that your attorney will request from taxes onward about the property. Feel free to send me an email if you have any questions. My name is Matt Rosensteele with Coldwell Banker Tamarindo Realty. Thanks for watching as always. Have a good day. Pura vida.